This is how to set up your own template as well as default audio and MIDI tracks in Ableton Live to improve your efficiency and productivity when you're producing music. First thing you're going to want to do is launch Ableton Live. From here, you're going to have an audio track. As you see, there's no audio effects here. You're going to want to decide what audio effects that you typically use on your audio tracks in your day-to-day production. For me, the most commonly used audio effects I use for my audio tracks are a utility for when I'm mixing and mastering my track. This allows me to turn the mono on for the track to get a better image of how everything is sounding. In addition, I like to drag an EQ 8 as well as a basic reverb. From here, I like to turn the reverb off. In some scenarios, I like to turn my first adjuster like this and set it to 120 Hertz if I'm using a sample to cut out the low frequencies. A good way of implementing this is to have this turned off and then turn it on when you need it. If there's any other effects you would like to put on your audio track, you would then import them now. From there, you're going to right click on your audio track, and at the bottom you're going to click Save as Default Audio Track. If you already have an audio track saved as your default audio track, it will ask you if you would like to override it. Now moving on to the MIDI track, insert a new MIDI track using Control Shift and T on Windows. For my default MIDI track, I like to have a MIDI clip already imported. To do this, you can drag and highlight this section and right click, insert empty MIDI clip, or Control Shift M will also do the same thing. From here, you're going to want to implement any MIDI effects or audio effects on your MIDI track. Audio and MIDI effects can go on MIDI tracks. However, on audio tracks, only audio effects can be applied. For my default MIDI track, I have a very similar layout, implementing the utility as well as an EQ8 and a reverb. It is important to note I do turn off the reverb for both of these tracks because it can be misleading when reverb is turned on and you forget. So I think it's important to turn these off and then turn them on as you need them. If you would like to put any notes in here, you can also do that as well. I find this beneficial for my hi-hat. I'll show you how I like to use this in a second. Now, once you have your effects set for your MIDI track, you're going to want to do the same thing, save as default MIDI track. Now, when you implement a new audio track using Control T, those effects will be already preset, as well as for your MIDI track using Control Shift T. I find this extremely beneficial because it speeds up my efficiency when I'm producing music. For my default template, I typically have this laid out here. One of my most used plugins is Arteria's Analog Lab 5. Then I like to import another MIDI track, calling this my 808s. You can also adjust any of these colors by right-clicking on the track and changing them to how you like them. From here, another beneficial thing to speed up your production is to create a drum group. Depending how you use your drums, there's different ways you can go about attacking this. One of the ways I like to use my drums is by using everything in MIDI. While there's advantages and disadvantages, I'll let you decide what you would like to do. Here I've pulled up my default template. This is my drum rack. I have all of the different MIDI tracks being sent to the drums instead of to the master, and then the drums being sent to the master. Under my drum group, I have no audio effects, and going all the way down, I have the same effects for pretty much every single track. What I was getting to about having a default template for notes is for my hi-hats, I like to have my hi-hats hitting every quarter note with an 8-bar loop for my default MIDI track for my hi-hats. I like doing this because I find the sound of a hi-hat to be better when I'm imaging as opposed to using the standard metronome. So from here, you're going to want to make any final adjustments to your individual tracks, as well as any color adjustments to your individual tracks. Once you have proceeded with that, to save this as your default template, you're going to want to go to File, Save Live Set as Template. You're going to want to name your template, then go to Save Live Set as Default Set. Once you do this, now every time you launch Ableton Live, your default template will load up, saving you time when you're producing music. Check out my other videos for more informational tutorials on Ableton Live and music production.